Yeah, let's talk figure skating. So, can you just tell me a little bit about how figure skating is looking to use AI?
Yeah. So if to start, like if you think about figure skating, it actually used to be the second most watched sport on TV in the US in the 90s behind only the NFL. It was huge. If you think about it today, it's virtually invisible outside of the Winter Olympics. So people officiating and in charge of the sport are trying to make it more popular and more accessible in the streaming age. There's one rule this season that ice dancers have to skate to music from the 1990s, like Spice Girls or the Backstreet Boys. But that comes with a very serious complication, which is that more contemporary music has stricter licensing requirements. And neither the sports world nor the music industry has totally figured this out yet. So, the figure skating governing body, mind you, has given skaters permission to use AI generated music for their programs, which is going to be sort of a first at the Winter Olympics. There is one Czech ice dance team who is using an partially AI generated program that is inspired by Bon Jovi.
It's pretty incredible that figure skating used to be so popular and now the script is completely flipped. I guess broadening it out to sports at large, a lot of your reporting, Sarah, was about music licensing and the issue of who can use what and for how much money. Can you talk a little more about some of the challenges in that area, not just for figure skaters, but for athletes overall?
Totally. So if you think about the way TV used to be on linear and cable, if you didn't tune in at 8 p.m. to watch the program you wanted to see, it was gone. It was ephemeral. Now we have streaming platforms, we have social media. Obviously, that's given consumers a lot more choice in when and how they watch their programs. And for other sports, like football and basketball and soccer, it's great. You can access it pretty much anytime. With sports like figure skating, which have more IP considerations, particularly around their music, the streaming and social media aspect of it is complicated because no one has quite figured out how to license the music in this commercial way so that it can live on streaming platforms and it can live on social media for extended periods of time. Um, One of the reasons for that is actually that there are so many variables, right? If you want to use one piece of music, say it's, Wannabe by the Spice Girls, you need the permissions from all of the Spice Girls, all of their songwriters, all of their publishing companies, and you need different permissions for choreographing that music. You need different permissions for putting that on television, and you need more permissions if you want to put that on a social media, whether it's a YouTube clip or a TikTok clip, and how long it may live there. So these are the kinds of things that everyone has to figure out in order for sports like figure skating to sort of modernize.
I mean, that's a lot of hoops to jump through. Can you give me a sense of how much that would cost, for an athlete or performer?
It's a great question. There's not really a simple answer. And the reason for that is because it depends, like we were saying, on how many people are involved in a given song. If it has one songwriter, that's easier and you can basically negotiate directly with that person. If it's a pop song, typically pop songs have dozens of writers, and they may all be represented by different music labels. And the tricky thing is, even if you get, you know, 11 out of 12 people to agree to say, like, sure, I'm okay with using this song for an Olympic routine, if one person says no, you can't use any of it. And so this is obviously very time consuming for skaters, for their choreographers, for coaches, for the governing body behind the sport. The good news is that all of the people I spoke to, sports officials, skaters, record labels, streaming companies, they all want to solve this issue. Everyone agrees that musicians should get paid and everyone wants to use music in a professionally licensed way. It's just very complicated.
How does AI sort of factor into that, Sarah, as a solution potentially?
So the ISU, which is the international governing body for figure skating, recognizes that, there's this paradox here where skaters want to use more popular music or more contemporary music, but as we're discussing, it's so complicated. So they're giving skaters this option to use AI generated music as a way to, find something that fits all of the competition rules. Skating officials have explicitly said, like, this is why we're giving skaters the permission to use AI. It hasn't been widely adopted yet, but we are seeing it, like we mentioned, with this Czech ice dance team who are using a Bon Jovi inspired AI program. And as I'm talking to people for this story, everyone agrees that it's really uncharted territory. Um, and when I talk to the record labels, for example, this is something very much on, the lips of the music industry right now. Warner Music Group, one of the big three record labels, just yesterday settled a lawsuit with the AI music company Suno over copyright infringement. They're now settled and they're entering into a licensing agreement where some of these AI platforms that are creating music for, any consumer to use. This is policy that is currently being hammered out at the same time that we're talking about this in sports. Why it's interesting in a figure skating context is that we really haven't had a wide scale sort of cultural gut check, right, for how AI generated music is used. And we may get that at the Olympics with this routine.
It seems to me, Sarah, when you're talking about this, the licensing issue is a lot bigger than just sports. What are some other ways besides AI music that people are trying to solve this problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are some startups that are working on this. There's one I spoke to called Click and Clear, which was founded by a former professional cheerleader, because cheerleading is another sport that relies on music. And what she's doing is negotiating blanket licensing agreements across different record labels, specifically for athletes to log on to her website, Click and Clear, and figure out, if a piece of music that they want to use is something that they can get permissions for. It is, a genuine resource. The ISU has a relationship with Cook and Clear, but there is no single comprehensive database across every record label, every distributor of music, where you can efficiently see every single copyright that needs to be cleared for music use. Even when I was talking to sync executives who are, professionals at record labels who deal specifically with this kind of commercial licensing, they've told me, like, this is one of the biggest issues in the industry, is like having a singular database where you can identify everyone who would need to be credited and or paid to have their music used.
Just going back to the AI issue for a minute here, I could see a world where musicians and the industry overall have a really huge problem with AI generated music. I know it's one solution, but also it could cause some conflicts, especially if AI is trained on that music. Can you talk a bit more about how, athletes, how artists are responding to that and how they're dealing with that tension?
Yeah, so a lot of this is being arranged through the record labels. These record labels are the ones that are talking to the AI platforms like Suno, and determining whether or not their creators, their musicians, are consenting to have their music licensed and trained on training these platforms, right? So the record labels are essentially doing this on the artist's behalf. That said, certain artists can, for any reason, just decide that they don't want their music used in that way. The same way musicians can decide, I don't want my music used at the Olympics. That's just not the way I want my music used or distributed. And they have that right because they're the copyright holder. So when you're talking about so many different variables and uh, as we were saying before, if even one songwriter or one musician on a recording decides that they don't want their music licensed in that way, then you have to pull all of the content either from the AI platform or from the Olympics, because you need total consent.
Got it. Well, that is fascinating, Sarah. I'm definitely going to be thinking a lot harder about music and soundtrack when I'm watching football this weekend. Thank you so much
Totally.
for coming on.
Thanks for having me.